to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jarrett, and I'm here to answer all your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the show where you can ask all your questions about politics, and no one's going to judge you or roast you or make fun of you or call you names or harass you or anything of that nature. This is not a show for fighting or debating or harassing or bullying. This is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. There's a lot of misinformation and propaganda running around rampant out there. So, this is the show where you can ask all your questions about what's really going on, and we can hopefully start having another shared version of reality where we can all agree on what's going on, and then maybe at least we can only argue about the various ways to solve the problems. But right now we can't even agree on what's actually happening. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. I am not here to judge or roast or make fun of people. I'm not going to yell at you or call you a fascist or call you a cuck or anything like that. Everybody's welcome here so long as you're asking questions in good faith. You will be given an answer in good faith. And I know politics is really confusing, especially now. And if you don't know like what the filibuster is or what reconciliation is or what's going on with all the various spending bills, if you don't know what the various agencies are or who the people are that are members of Trump's cabinet, we just kind of like bandy about these last names as if everybody knows who we're talking about. And if you don't know what those things are, it can be really difficult to be a part of the conversation and to actually know what's going on in our country and our government and in the world. What's up, me who? Good to see you again. Do I like cats? I like them fine. I'm allergic to them, so I don't have any, but you know, they're cute. So yeah, what was I saying? Everybody's welcome here, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. I know that there is. I know there are a lot of really popular shows out there where Republicans and Democrats yell at each other and call each other names. That is not what this show is. This show is good faith engagements on the substance. Let's see here. Average Joe says Stream Elements is near good faith. I'm gonna have to respectfully disagree with there. Mihu says, "What do you think about Stalin?" I don't know. I'm not really a history guy. As far as I know, Stalin perpetuated like some pretty serious atrocities, you know, on his own people and potentially others. So yeah, I'm gonna say a thumbs down on Stalin. All right, John Selfridge, good to see you again. How long do you think the crap with Iran will go on? I mean, the fact that Trump is talking about this like he's wrapping it up at the same time as he's sending 13,000 troops over there, it seems as though we're not ending anytime soon. Okay, what do we got here? African Mother says, "Do you know what gift Donald Trump was said we were given?" I don't know if he's announced that. I remember he was being really coy about it. I am skeptical that it is even real. All right, and thank you to everybody who helped me achieve my first gift goal today. Cohen says, "Can you explain the differences between U.S. parties and EU political parties?" I can't. I can tell you the difference between U.S. parties, but I am not well versed in EU political parties. D. Scott and Muzzking, thank you for the roses. Raul Duke says, "Should we seize the means of production?" Yeah, but there are nonviolent ways that we can do that. For example, we can vote for politicians that will give workers more rights, pass laws that insist that companies give their employees more benefits and shit like that. D. Scott says, "Didn't he say it was 8 oil tankers?" He's claiming that Iran gave us 8 oil tankers. Doubt. Stephen Peterson says, "Do you think Trump will really send additional 10K troops to Iran?" You know, Stephen, I want to be 100% on this and not be a perpetuator of any misinformation. I read that that was already in process, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not going to stake my reputation on it, but my understanding is that those troops are already on their way over there. D. Scott and Muzz King, thank you so much for the second batch of roses. Fierce Phoenix says, "I don't think elected candidates will free the proletariat anytime soon." Fierce Phoenix, here's the thing we've never tried. You know, when people go out there and vote, then changes happen, but people don't vote. Like we have really pathetic voter turnout here in America. So my thing is, why don't we try voting and see if that helps? Stephen Peterson says, do you think Trump's goal is to take all of Iran? I don't even think that Trump knows what his goal is. Albert Griffin says, should we deport all Jews so this show will end once and for all? So that's an example of the kind of comment that gets you blocked. Congratulations, Albert. HDHDHG says, when was the last time the U.S. government put America's first over Israel? Lots of times. HDHDHD, as far as I can tell, investing in green technology during the Biden administration was not like for Israel. Pepe Orozco says, what do you think about Newsom's scandal about he is a Zionist? I don't really care for Gavin Newsom. I'll be clear about that. He's definitely better than every Republican politician, but yeah, him equivocating on trans rights, him equivocating on Israel, like it all reads as I am trying to run as a centrist for president, and I think he's done some good things and some bad things as governor of California, but he's definitely not my first choice for primary. Monty says, "Wow, that's a lie." What's a lie, Monty? Stacy Inlex says, sealing our borders was for sure America first. No, I disagree with that, Stacy Inlex. Okay, V says, was AH really a Zionist or was it just a name? I don't think that AH was a Zionist. Let's see here. Monty says, Gavin Newsom sucks. Yeah, I mean, he's done some good things and some bad things. Let's see here. Gabe says, how do you feel about Marxism? It depends on how you define it. If it's workers owning the means of production, I'm for it. V says, socialist, I meant. Not really, sir. Oh, was AH really a socialist? No, AH was not really a socialist. He was a dictator. He's like the archetypal fascist, Monty says, dude, I watch you all the time just to check when you are right with an open bind, but you haven't. Well, then you're clearly not watching, Monty. Valentina says, thoughts on abortion. I am pro-choice, but even if you are pro-life, you should still vote for Democrats because Democratic policies decrease abortions, Republican policies increase abortions, and they also make pregnancy more dangerous for women. Jay Fine says, thoughts on Melanchon. I don't know what that is. Stephen Peterson says, wait, I must be late. Why is Gavin Newsom considered bad now? Gavin Newsom's done a bunch of things that are bad. He has some pretty sketchy connections to the fast food chain Panera. He kind of equivocated on trans rights. He kind of equivocated on calling Israel an apartheid state, which I don't know how you justify that. I'd be interested in hearing his rationalization for it. He's done some other bad things. He's done some good things. I find him to be a completely meh person, but meh is better than bad. Okay, Average Joe says, do you think it's smart for Democratic candidates in, I don't know which state MI is, it could be Missouri, it could be Michigan, to lean into pro-Israel messaging and purity test pro-Palestinian Dems, considering how many Muslim voters are in that state? Feels like Harris 2.0. I think it's unfair to describe the Harris campaign that way, but I also believe that it is wrong. Michigan, thank you, Average Joe. I also think that it is wrong for Democratic candidates to lean into pro-Israel messaging and purity test pro-Palestinian Democrats. Like, I think that is a stupid thing to do. Whether you are a centrist or leftist, I think that is a stupid thing to do. African Mother says, do you think the border is sealed and how would we know? It is true that the Trump administration has been more aggressive about all immigration coming from the southern border, both legal and illegal. But it is also true that there are still people crossing the border illegally. There are still, apprehensions that are happening on the border. Like, I was just in a discussion with somebody who is 100% operating in bad faith on my TikTok, who was basically saying, like, now there are 0 people coming across the border. And I was like, you realize 0 is impossible, right? V says, what is national syndicalism? I don't know. Lost Cause says, who'd you vote for? Democrats up and down the ballot. Bit Nevo says, Nebraska farm fields have been on fire all week. Do you believe something nefarious is happening? This is the first time I'm hearing about it. Bit Nevo. I have no fucking clue. I need to read up about it. Andrew says, "Oh, for sure, not MAGA at all. LOL. Fully on the left, my friend." It sounds like you're being sarcastic, Andrew. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Mio says, "Do you think Charlie Kirk will become president?" Probably not, because he was assassinated. Chris Katakayam says, "Why is Zionism everywhere?" I don't think it is everywhere. Andrew says, responding to someone else. Gotcha. Duncan Dempsey says, thoughts on James Alaric. I don't know who it is. Landon Phillips says, what is your opinion on the Israeli involvement in our government? I am against it. I do not believe that other nations should be pressuring our governments to do things nefariously, the same way that I don't like it when Russia does it, or China does it, or North Korea does it, or whatever. I think it's important to mention that there are other extremely well-funded lobbying organizations besides AIPAC that are also really bad. The Anarchist says, what are your thoughts on anarchism? I have never seen an argument that supports the idea that anarchism is the way to go. Paula says, are you a Democrat or a Republican? I'm a Democrat. BitNevo says, there's no end in sight for the fires. No major news is reporting on it. These fields feed us all. Yeah, I mean, I got to give it a Google, BitNevo, because again, I have no idea. I had no idea this was even happening. Nick Zozi says, do you not accept guests in the live? I do, but it's extremely rare, and it is extremely sporadic when it happens. So you can't really tell when it's going to happen. Sometimes sometimes it happens, sometimes it don't. You know. Let's see here. Stephen Peterson says, if J.D. Vance removed himself from MAGA, could he be a good president because he was a Democrat before? No, I don't think so. I don't trust J.D. Vance, and I don't think that anybody does. Like, it's clear that he sold his soul to be a part of the MAGA movement, and he is already kind of equivocating on that. He is already trying to put one foot out the door and try to suggest that he is against this incursion/war into Iran. Seth Maxey says, thank you for being respectful of both sides. I'm conservative, but don't feel attacked by you. I appreciate you being here, Seth. Why do you consider yourself conservative and not a liberal or a leftist? Rebecca says, selling his soul. Yeah, he's gone back on everything he actually believes in so that he can be a part of Trump's administration. Nick says, okay, did you know Palestine was founded by Jeffrey Epstein? It wasn't. No More BS says, I don't trust any Dem or Lib. I don't know why. There's no evidence to suggest that Democrats or liberals are less trustworthy than other people. Sunny says nuclear. Would you like to expand on your question, Sunny? Dan Blackwood says J.D. Vance has very elastic principles, which is good for VP hopefuls, bad for president hopefuls. I agree with that, Dan Blackwood. Dr. Benstone says, will Trump's signature devalue the dollar more? Potentially. Seth Maxey says, my Christian values are what primarily drive my political beliefs, also fiscal ideology. I find that interesting, Seth, because I have found that the policies of the Republican Party are both anti-Christian in nature and also fiscally irresponsible. Like, all of the major market crashes and recessions have happened under Republican presidents. We have had way more economic development and prosperity under Democratic presidents. Jesus Christ, as far as I know, taught to feed the hungry, clothe the poor, house the homeless, treat the stranger like your neighbor, love thy neighbor, and that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. So how do you square both of those things with your ideology? You know, let me know. Let me know how you feel about that, my guy. All right, Average Joe says, LMAO, hold on. Unfair. The Harris campaign sent Bill Clinton and Richie Torres to Michigan and talked about the importance of Judea and Sumeria. That was such a big fuck you to Palestinians. They did this knowing how many Michigan voters picked none during the Democratic primary. Seth Maxey says, I'm not a Republican. Don't misconstrue me. Oh, no, I'm not. I wasn't trying to say that you were, man, but you said that you're a conservative. And the Conservative Party and the ideology of the Republican Party are maybe not fully synonymous. Maybe there's not a lot of daylight between the two, but they're definitely related. You know, siblings, if not cousins. So yeah, where do you? I guess I don't understand if you're not a Democrat. and you're not a Republican, but you are a conservative, then how square that circle for me, my guy. All right, so average Joe, I don't have any data to support this claim. My data is this, that Kamala Harris made moves during her campaign and before her campaign to make it clear that she did not have the same view on the relationship between Israel and Palestine that Joe Biden did. Now, because she was VP, she obviously couldn't do a lot more to sort of like communicate her disagreements there, but the moves were clear, you know. Now, the billionaire propaganda machine was very big on pushing that to, especially to Muslim voters in Michigan, and it was an extremely successful propaganda campaign that, you know, resulted in Trump being president and the people of Palestine being even more fucked than they were under Biden. So, yeah, I don't know if that is how I would describe Harris's campaign. You know, you make a good point. You make good points that I don't have. You know, this is not my argument is not great. You know, your argument is better. My argument is not great. My argument is worse than your argument. But I would still say that, you know, as somebody who enthusiastically voted for Democrats in 2024, that I do not believe that the Harris campaign was as pro-Israel and anti-Palestine as people are making it out to be. And I don't know if there is a good way to answer this question, because all we have on both sides of that argument are this thing happened, which suggests that that's the case. And then somebody else will go, well, this thing happened, which suggests the other case, you know? Yeah. And I fully admit that I don't think that I have the most convincing argument here. Dom DeMercurio says, you seem reasonable. You are one person, right? I am one person. African, it reminds me of a friend of mine, this guy named Brett Drunk, has this, he's a stand-up comedian. He has this bit about like, so he put a stand-up clip on the internet and somebody says, this guy's funny, is he Jews? Question, plural. You know, he's like, it kind of felt weird. It's like, this guy's too funny. There's no way there's just one Jew in there. Let me see. All right, Ms. Gonna Be All Right. Good to see you. Mia, good to see you. Stephen Peterson says, do you think Kamala not doing podcasts with Joe Rogan, etc., played a role in her losing the election? I don't think that if she had done more podcasts, she would have won. It might have moved the needle a little bit. I honestly think that the three things that made it so that Kamala Harris lost in 2024 were the fact that she only had 107 days, incumbency bias, and an unprecedented propaganda campaign over social media funded by the billionaire oligarchs who wanted Trump elected. All right, Zandazile says 9/11 question mark? Excellent question. 9/11. What would you like to know about it? Vanessa says, how does Trump make fun of dyslexia and it's okay? You know, Vanessa, I agree with you that that's not an okay thing that he does, but I honestly kind of think that that's really far down the list of Trump sins for us to get upset about. Ted says, what's the progressive Dems' opinions on Newsom from an outsider in the UK? Progressive Democrats do not like Gavin Newsom. He is much more of a centrist than progressive Democrats would ever go as far as endorsing in the primary election. There are progressives like myself, and I would encourage everybody who considers himself a progressive to mirror this philosophy, that if Gavin Newsom wins the primary, that we are going to support him with everything that we fucking have, because I guarantee you he's going to be better than whatever fucking ding-dong becomes the Republican nominee. JJ Tree DCCC says, I never heard of Bretton Woods, but preaches on oligarchy. I present to you the modern left. I don't know what that means. Me says, how does Trump do everything and get away with it? Trump gets away with it because he is in league with two extremely powerful and wealthy organizations, the Republican Party and the billionaire class. He's also an extremely corrupt individual who is willing to sell all favors to people, and it is very valuable if you are a bad person to have a corrupt, powerful person that is willing to be corrupted, you know? So every billionaire that has bought a presidential pardon from Trump is supportive of Trump because he knows, because those really shitty people now know, all right, if I do anything else bad, I can just give Trump a couple $1 million and then I will suddenly be out of harm's way, you know? Alrighty, let's see here. Zandazali says, would you support a Democratic Socialist candidate? 100%. All of the candidates that I support are self-described Democratic Socialists. And, I've talked about this before, but just to be like 100% on this, I don't know what the difference is in political ideology between somebody who describes themselves as a progressive Democrat versus somebody who describes themselves as a Democratic Socialist. All of my favorite politicians describe themselves as Democratic Socialists. I describe myself as a progressive Dem just because I feel like it it hits a little bit harder. It hits a little bit more center for me. I also think it's much more valuable framing, as there have been decades of smear campaign against words like socialism and communism. It kind of feels like people are asking to be fear mongered by the right. Dom says, we are all people with lots of stupid opinions. Mork says, do you think communism is inherently bad? I guess it depends on how you define it. Like, I don't know if the world, or at least America, is ready for a full communist government, but I definitely think that workers should own the means of production. I definitely think that we should be encouraging companies to be employee owned. AE97 says both parties are working towards the New World Order and they are in favor of a satanic agenda. That is not accurate, AE97. Finish says USSR and Cuba weren't communist. That is accurate. ME says, do you think it's possible that Trump stole the 2024 election? Possible, unlikely. I haven't seen significant evidence to suggest that he did. I have seen some evidence, and I need that thread to get pulled a little bit further before I start making the claim that he fully stole the 2024 election. Him and the Republican Party fully stole the 2024 election. Shork says, do you think the SAVE Act is probably dead now? I don't think that there will ever be a moment when the SAVE Act is fully dead. I believe that Trump thinks that he is politically vulnerable right now, and that the way that he becomes politically unvulnerable is to create more voter suppression avenues. So yeah, it's never over, unfortunately. Sulo says Nazis or commies. I mean, if I had to choose, I'd probably go commies. Pepe, sorry, if I had to choose, I would definitely go commies. So for Nazis. Rob Ryan, great to see you again. Over under on an Iran invasion after the markets close. I don't know. I never know how to answer that question of over under, but I'd say it's highly likely. Yeah, Trump has shown, that this is his like move so many times, where he feints in one direction and then does the opposite. Like, it's the most telegraphed hit in all of in the history of war. All right, somebody whose name I can't read says, why did the Soviet Union collapse? That's not really my area of expertise. Stephen Collins says, thoughts on Netanyahu? Netanyahu's a war criminal. He is guilty of perpetuating a genocide on the people of Palestine. He's an extreme right-wing figure who has aligned himself with other far-right extremists, starting wars in Iran and Lebanon and doing atrocities. Like, the people of Israel need to wake the fuck up about what their government is up to and vote for other people. Ines says, is the far right as dangerous as the far left? The far right is way more dangerous than the far left. And the FBI, which is very much not a squishy libtard organization, has said as much for decades. Somebody whose name I can't read says, thoughts on Charlie Kirk? I'm against all violence, political or otherwise. Political violence is particularly dangerous because of how escalatory it can be. So I do not believe that him getting assassinated was a good thing. I do not believe that we should be solving our disagreements like that. It made things much more dangerous for America in general, let alone people that just, people part of the political sphere. That being said, Charlie Kirk was not a good guy. He was a liar. He was a con artist. He was toxic for our political conversations and communities. Yeah, he was a liar. Name I can't read says, what's your ideology? I'm a progressive Democrat. Ez Ali says, what taxing more the rich would do? I'm curious. I'm curious if that sentence was phrased that way because English is not your first language, or if you're just in a rush. And no tea, no shade if English is not your first language. Like I'm trying to learn a second language myself, and I'm sure I would sound not nearly as eloquent even as that if I tried to write something in Spanish. But what would taxing the rich do? Taxing the rich would do a couple of things. Number one, it would decrease the deficit. Right now, we have an unprecedented deficit where even the interest payments on our debt are basically unpayable. This news story went under the radar, but America is technically insolvent right now because of tax cuts for the wealthy and war spending and ICE funding that the Trump administration has perpetuated. So taxing the rich would solve that problem. It would be able to fund social programs and organizations that would increase global stability, would clean up the environment, would eliminate poverty, medical testing. Like one of the things the Trump administration did was cancel research into pediatric cancer cures and shit like that. But I think a bigger thing that taxing the rich would do is it would take power away from the ruling class. Right now, there are people who are so wealthy that they could pay people to do crimes for them, like unaliving people or things that are equally shitty. And I don't think that human beings should have that power. I don't think that there should be so much poverty and so much unbelievable income inequality that a billionaire could pay somebody enough money to ignore all of their morals. Like that seems to be like a bad situation that we are currently living in. The reason why so many of our politicians are bought and paid for is because political system in America has allowed such rampant income inequality that now people have so much money that they can afford to spend $10 billion trying to sway elections, because that's like a drop in the bucket for those fucking guys. Like, you think Elon Musk gives a shit about spending $10 billion on an election? Like, that's the equivalent of you or I spending $20 on lunch. Right, Logan says, would you say Islam is homophobic and sexist by Western standards? I know that there's this argument about Islam, but I actually don't really buy it, because if you look at religious texts in Christianity, you will see homophobia and sexism and racism. You will see advocacy for things like slavery and child marriage and stoning people to death, for planting two different crops next to each other. So, yeah, I don't believe that Islam is worse in that regard than any other organized religion. Obviously, there are extremists that exist in the world of Islam, the same way that there are extremists that exist in the world of Christianity and Judaism and potentially Shintoism and Buddhism. Like it's if you really want to throw shade at the religious texts of Islam, like, people in glass houses, let's just say that. Mino MP3 says, what's your opinion on distributism? I don't know what it is. Clariter says, hi, are you MAGA or support Trump? I am not MAGA. I do not support Trump. Okay, Ted says, do you think there'll be a Republican-based reaction against MAGA in 2028 given Trump's unpopularity? I definitely think there are people in the MAGA movement who will leave, but I do think there's probably a significant portion of the MAGA movement that will not abandon Trump no matter what he does. All right, Mork says, do you prefer democratic socialism or social democracy? I don't know what the difference is between those two. As far as I can tell, it's just the same words, but flipped. Okay, let's see here. Average Joe, clearing shit up for everybody, says democratic socialist is more directly focused on the economic side of government. Progressivism tends to place a higher importance on civil human rights, which includes workers' rights, making the economy an indirect importance. Ooh, interesting. And he also claims that he is maybe only 80% clear on that. Yeah, to me, Average Joe, this seems semantic. Like higher importance on civil and human rights, including workers' rights. Yeah, to me, this is 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, in my opinion. All right, Jeffrey Rickson says, Christians like to compare to distract how bad Christianity is. Yeah, I think that's generally pretty accurate. D. Scott says, oh, did you see what happened at CPAC? I heard that the CPAC audience cheered for impeachment. I also heard that there was like weird, like nobody really knew what to applaud for and what to boo for. So it doesn't appear as though the conservative movement is fracturing a bit. Who was that dude that I was talking to about why do you describe yourself as a conservative? And he mentioned Christianity and fiscal responsibility, and then when I asked him to clarify, I haven't seen his response. Did you respond? I haven't seen. Let's see here. Saucebot says, did you see that Kash Patel got hacked? I did see that Kash Patel got hacked. More people should be upset about this. Like the fact that the Trump administration is an intelligence nightmare. It is basically putting all of our private government secrets out in the open for anybody to hack. Like the president should not have a phone, like a cell phone. You know, they should not be doing shit on Signal. And the fact that Kash Patel is so loosey-goosey with his password that he was able to get hacked, like, that is really concerning. Like, what information are our adversaries getting because of that? Like, god damn, like, why aren't we upset about this, man? Why aren't we more upset about this? Mino says, distributism is the idea of spreading property and production widely, not concentrating it in a few. Well, I'm for that, Mino. Born to Bark says, CPAC had please clap energy. Sounds accurate to me. Average Joe says, centrists will still call them both tankies and the right will still call them commies. LOL, I agree in terms of messaging, it doesn't matter. Yeah, you know, I would include that right wing will call anybody commies, whether they are centrist or lefties or whatever. Alrighty, let's see here. Excellent questions so far, everybody. Randy Barber says every society needs some socialism. If your house is on fire, call the for-profit fire department. Randy Barber, I have made the exact same argument on many of my videos. Mino says it's a Catholic political ideology. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you know, I'm for that. You know, I don't care what you call it, but but I am for that. Muzzking says his password was cash 2026. Pretty darn funny in my opinion. William Shane says Republicans can't govern another day in America's shit show. TSA funding just blown up. No arguments here. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jared. I'm here to answer any questions about politics, be they simple or complicated. I know politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So this is the place where you can ask all your questions about politics and no one's going to judge you or roast you or try to fight you. Pepe Orozco says, someone's hate socialism until state rescue bank. Accurate as hell, Pepe Orozco. Bert's, great to see you again, says, do you agree that Bernie's socialist argument is performative? No, I do not. Bernie has been one of the most consistent politicians in the history of America's government. African Mother says, don't you, that is what Donald Trump wants, a shit show that we miss the important things. Do you think that Donald Trump wants a shit show so that we miss the important things? You know, I don't know how much I rate the argument that certain things that Trump does are distractions and certain things are the things he's trying to distract us from. I think that everything is the same. Everything is terrible and for his own benefit and to hurt people that he doesn't like, and also is a distraction from all the other terrible things that he is doing that are just putting money, that's just putting dollars in his own pocket and hurting people that he doesn't like. Okay, Mino says, what's your opinion on guild socialism and classical socialism? This is not really my area of expertise, Mino. Mork says, to explain, social dem allows some capital to exist while having a strong public system like Sweden, while democratic socialism doesn't, and it's completely controlled by the people. Yeah, I'm still not 100% sure. You know, this is not your fault, but I did not clear it up for me. Yeezus Glazer says, how do you feel about the Iran war? The war with Iran is illegal, irresponsible, poorly planned. There are not enough negative words in the dictionary for how I feel about Trump's war with Iran. Like the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were were catastrophes, but at least they were planned by people to some extent. You know, we're by the end of this conflict with Iran, we're going to be begging for them to be the level of catastrophes that were Iraq and Afghanistan. Okay. Randy Barber says the term socialism has become a bad word, such as communism in the 1950s. Yeah, I mean, but that is, you know, Randy, that is the goal of the billionaire class. Like, this is not something that happened accidentally. Like, they have been behind this propaganda campaign for generations. Jesus Glazer says, does Iran even have weapons of mass destruction? They do not have them at the moment, as far as I know. If you're talking about nuclear weapons, I don't believe I've seen any reporting on them having like any biological weapons or things of that nature. But yeah, they definitely have rockets. Nothing that could reach the continental United States. Yeah. As far as I know, the answer to that question is no. Ms. Dolly says, I'm worried about Save America Act. Will it pass? So, Ms. Dolly, you are right to worry, but it is very unlikely that that bill will pass. You know, I'm not going to say that it's 100% not going to pass, because you can never put anything past the shittiness of this Republican Party and Donald Trump, but it's very, very unlikely. If you're worried about it, there are things you can do. You know, there is work that we can all do as citizens of America to try to make sure that the SAVE Act doesn't pass. And obviously, your efforts will have more or less effects depending on where you live. But yeah, if you want to know things that you can do to try to deal with that worry, then let me know. Okay, Born to Bark says, do they have WMDs? Let's just check the packing slip from the Reagan years. That's pretty funny. Mork says, do you prefer capitalism or communism? I don't prefer either one. I say let's have a mixed model. You know, let's have private companies that are owned by the workers. Jesus Glazer says, did we get dragged into Iran because of Israel? There is a significant amount of reporting suggesting that is the case. I don't think that we can discount also how much money the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Qataris have put into Trump's pockets, and the fact that maybe they also wanted this war as well. There are a lot of really shitty, corrupt, illegal motivations for why Trump allowed this to happen. Tink says, if the SAVE Act passes, will it make it difficult for married women to vote? If they change their name, Tink, yes, 100%. It will make it difficult for a lot of people to vote. The issue with the SAVE Act is twofold. It is the voter suppression by bureaucracy and voter suppression by the federal government. And the bureaucracy of it all is, you would need to have the time and money to go get the necessary documents and go to the DMV or, mail shit and fax shit and et cetera, et cetera. But because of that bureaucracy, it allows the federal government to do more targeted voter suppression. So if you have your passport application in the mail and the federal government knows that you generally vote Democrat, like maybe they will take their sweet ass time fulfilling that application, or maybe they will just lose it entirely. If you need to go to the DMV to get a driver's license to be able to vote, maybe they shut down DMVs in your area. So that adds another like 3 or 4 hours to your commute to make your ID happen. If you are a married person and you need to fill out blah, blah, blah form in order to make it clear that you changed your name, and that's the reason why your documents don't match, maybe those forms get lost at whatever federal agency is in control. Like there's so many ways in which the SAVE Act can just be used to make sure that Republicans win elections. It has absolutely nothing to do, obviously, with stopping any kind of voter fraud. Magnetic Kanye says, why would I ask you about politics? Because I know a lot about it, Magnetic, and maybe there are things that you don't know or questions that you have that you want answered, and I could answer them for you. All right, Dan Blackroyd, breaking news. Oklahoma passes law making applying for a passport a deportable offense. That's very funny. I thought that was going to be a real breaking news alert, Dan. I was excited about it. Randy Barber says, no King's protest tomorrow. Will you be involved? Not only will I be involved, but I will be live streaming during it. I'm very excited about it. Tink says, what if my passport and ID matches? I also work for the government. if your passport, and if you have a passport, I believe that is all you need to be able to vote according to the Save Act. So I wouldn't worry about other things, but just in case, you should also have, your driver's license and your birth certificate and shit like that. Alrighty, let's see here. Average Joe said, you mentioned something to the effect that you didn't have the stats to convince you that the Harris campaign intended to disaffect pro-Palestinian voters. What amount/type of stats references or coincidences would you need for my argument to be convincing enough? That's a really good question, Average Joe. I don't have a good answer for you. It's like, I don't believe that certain politicians who I have seen be good politicians, when they do things that seem to appeal to a centrist messaging strategy, I don't buy it. I'm like, I know this is a more progressive person than this, but they are saying this because they need to be able to win in a general election. And, that I will fully admit is a faith-based belief. But if you look at the way that the Obama administration governed, they governed more centrist than I believe Obama was as a human being. And weirdly, the Biden administration governed more progressive than I believe that Biden was as a human being, or at least as he campaigned. So yeah, there is not a one-to-one of messaging strategy to actual governing philosophy. Yeah, and the political pressure of AIPAC and centrism and accusations of anti-Semitism does push people to do some of the things that you described, which makes me think, well, she probably wouldn't have done that, had she actually gotten into office. Ecuadorian, good to see you again. If I win office back home, I will only be working with blue states and cities. Only send a message. I don't think that you should do that. Average Joe says, LOL, okay, what is the limit? Words or characters? I'm not doing it on purpose. You can fight stream elements on your own time, Average Joe. I believe I set it as at 300 characters. Randy Barber says, Oregon has mail-in voting only, no booths. What do you expect? Oh, I didn't know that. Oregon has no in-person voting. Oregon has 0 in-person voting. I find that very hard to believe. God. But I'm not calling you sus, Randy Barber. I'm agog. I'm aghast. Ted says, should progressive Democrats become more pro-NATO given Trump's actions in Greenland and Iran? I guess can I answer your question with a question, Ted? Which is that are progressive Dems historically less pro-NATO than centrist Democrats? Because for me, that does not seem like an issue within the progressive Democratic coalition. Ryan says, do you know who Sheridan Gorman is? No, I do not. Dark Timber says, should the USA get rid of the two-party system? Yeah, but the only way to do that is with ranked choice voting, and the only way to get ranked choice voting is to vote for the Democratic Party. Born to Bark says, why would progressives be anti-NATO? That's my question exactly. Born to Bark. Tink says, but you can drop your vote in a box in Oregon. All right, well, that's at least something, Lucas says, what do you think of Reform UK? I'm against all far right-wing parties, and Reform UK is one of them. Ecuadorian says, I'll just say Jarrett said I could. That's the opposite of what I said. Okay. Average Joe says, I can't say when, but I can see me and stream elements engaging in fisticuffs sometime in the future. Or maybe you fall in love. Enemies to lovers. Are we seeing that in the future? Toby says, Reform aren't far right. They 100% are. They are further to the right than the Tories. So 100% they are far right. Ted says, whereas the Republicans have been a lot more hawkish / pro-NATO, the squad seem to have anti-imperialist critiques of NATO. That's news to me, Ted. I'm interested in reading about it. But as far as I know, I'm a little bit more clued into the kind of like voter base. Like, what are the progressive voters thinking? And as far as I can tell, we're for international alliances and coalitions, especially against warmongering, invading countries like Russia. Okay, Aaron Gack says, "What do you think about globalism?" I think that there are issues with globalism. I've seen it firsthand. Like I lived in the UK for a couple of months when in like 1999, and then I went back in 2013 to visit some friends, and I was kind of shocked by how less British every place that I went looked. It looked so much more just like every other city with the exact same, like multinational chains and shit like that. And so, yeah, I think that 100% there is value to protecting culture, from globalism. But at the same time, there are a lot of positives to globalism, and there is sort of like an unstoppability to globalism as travel becomes easier and faster, and communication between nations becomes easier and faster. Like where I can have, thanks to translation apps, like real conversations with people in other countries who we don't speak each other's languages. So it's going to happen. The question, and it's going to be good if we make it good. But the question is, will we elect people who will make it good versus make it bad? Toby says, Tories are center-right, Reform are a more right-wing party, but by no means are they far-right. I mean, the Tories are far-right, and the right-wing and Reform is further to the right than that. It's an extremist movement, Toby. And so, again, you should not be voting for right-wing parties. Not in the UK, not in America, nowhere. Like, right-wing political ideologies are a tool of oppressive groups, like the billionaire class. Aaron Gack says, are you left-wing or right-wing? I am left-wing. Born to Bark says, globalism, we are all human on the same planet. I agree. Born to Bark. Yojo says, what do you think about UK politics? I know almost nothing about it. Mateo says, your delivery is disorganized. I like you, though. I'm kind of spitting off the dome here, Mateo. Like, I thought you liked me, man. What the fuck's going on? Alrighty. Average Joe says, then it would be Stream Elements and my wife engaging in fisticuffs. I mean, I think you need to talk to your wife about a potential throuple between the two of yous and Stream Elements, Like, it's 2026, man. We got polycules, we got all, there's no wrong way to make a family. Why can't you involve Stream Elements, A says, are you Israel or Palestinian? I am neither of those. If you're asking me which country I support the citizens of both of those countries, and I'm against the governing bodies of both of those countries. Huga Farron says, what do you think about Danish politics? I know nothing about it. The only thing I know is how to pronounce Huga. Mateo says, I do like you. A marketing consultant could make you a politician, though. I mean, if somebody wanted to do the work, then, if I could get votes just by doing this live stream, then I would do that. The Fixer Mike says, my wife and I are both 55 and have other boyfriends and girlfriends get with the time. Is that real? The Fixer Mike? That's very open-minded of you. Toby says, clearly know nothing about it if you're calling the Tories far right. They started the immigration shit. Like that, Toby, you just proved my point. Like the extreme anti-immigration policies and rhetoric coming out of Reform are what make it a far-right party. End of story. Ariane Nazemi says, thoughts on English politics? I know almost nothing about it. I just say don't vote Tory, don't vote Reform. Aaron Gack says, respect everyone, no matter their race, faith, sexuality, or gender. We are all humans. Completely agree with that. Toby, you are in question jail. If you do not ask questions going forward, you're going to get booted. I do not care for the kind of rhetoric that you are spreading on my live stream. Shork says, who would you support a politician who says Israel does not have a right to exist? I don't think I would, because I would want to know what they expect to happen to the people who are currently living in Israel who are innocent civilians. I do not believe in collective punishment. I do not believe that. I'm pretty sure it's a war crime. I do not believe in collective punishment. And if you are mad about what the Israeli government is doing in the Middle East, I think that you're right to be mad. But that is not the fault of every individual living in Israel. Okay, Hyan says, do you think politicians are useful in this modern society? Yeah, that's, we need people to govern. Average Joe, are you on my TikTok also, Average Joe? Because your question about the multiverses it's cooking my noodle, man. Carrison says, are you a socialist? I'm not a socialist. I'm not a capitalist. I'm not a communist. I believe in a mixed model. Average Joe says, this is my point regarding the Michigan primary is this. Whether intentional or not, pretending that Palestinian suffering doesn't exist didn't work in 2024. What's the benefit of repeating that now? Again, Average Joe, we're in agreement on not just what the messaging strategy should be, but also what the governing policy should be. That what Israel is doing is wrong. They've been doing wrong shit for a long time, and we should do everything in our power to put pressure on them to stop and to be better in that region. Now, are politicians not being strong enough on that in their messaging? That I cannot tell you. Is it more politically damaging to equivocate on that to appeal to a more centrist voter, or to not put yourself in the crosshairs of AIPAC, which is very good at losing people their elections? That I cannot tell you. That I do not know. It is my personal belief that you should eschew that, and you should campaign from your heart. Then you don't, was it Mark Twain that said you should always tell the truth because it's you don't have to remember as much shit as when you lie, something like that. It is easier to talk about these issues sincerely and accurately if you are not worried about what is politically popular. Dumbass says, are you Jeffrey Epstein? No, I am not. Hyan says, do you think trip? I don't know what that question means. Ammer says, do you believe the Kurds should get a state? Ammer, that question's a little over my head. I apologize. D, great to see you again, says, SAVE Act, the litigation aspect is also a concern. Ability to sue election officers. Oh boy, I didn't even see that in there. Wizard of Ozempic says, what do you think about what Indonesia is doing to the people of New Guinea? I know nothing about that, Wizard, so sorry about that. Hyan says, do you think Trump needs to leave the Middle East to make peace? Yes. Trump, I do not believe, has the intellectual capacity or the moral foundation to actually bring peace to any region at all. That is not how his brain operates. He lives in a zero-sum world of, I only make money and I only prosper and I only get more power if other people lose it. And so he likes it when people can't afford to live. He likes it when there is struggle and strife in places that are not wherever his feet currently are. Righty. Wes Williams says, two parties with different tactics but same goals. That is wildly inaccurate, Wes Williams. Would you like me to go into more detail on that? I am happy to. Toby says, would you agree that red states are better to live in than blue states? I would not. There's a reason why blue states are more popular. It's because they're better to live in. All of the stats are, support that. We have better healthcare outcomes. We have better educational outcomes, better infrastructure, better culture, without question. Dumbass says, I need proof that you're not Jeffrey Epstein. That's not my job. I don't need to prove that I'm not Jeffrey Epstein. You need to prove that I am Jeffrey Epstein. Innocent until proven guilty. Not Jeffrey Epstein until proven Jeffrey Epstein. Musking says, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. Thank you. That's the actual quotes. All right. Andrew Holman says, revolving the government's shutdown, what do you think Congress needs to do? That's a really good question. So I think the Democratic Party is doing what they should be doing. I think that they are standing firm on no more funding for ICE and CPB. There is very little we can do about taking away the current funding that they have. But if we are going to use whatever little political power the Democratic Party has right now to stop ICE and CPB from doing atrocities and ignoring people's human rights and doing fucking horrible things to people while they're being illegally detained, including potentially murder, including potentially SA, then yeah, they should be standing firm. it's difficult for me to say what the Republican Party should do, because there are clearly some psychotic elements within the elected Republican caucus that are just going to do what Trump wants them to do, or they don't give a shit if people are suffering so long as it's brown people. I don't know. I think the key is citizens putting pressure on Republicans to actually deal with and compromise with the Democratic Party. Because according to politicians that I believe and that I trust, the issue here is Republican intransigence, as opposed to not being able to find some middle ground. It's just Republicans being like, we're not going to do anything that you want us to do. Alrighty, let's see here. Average Joe says, I kind of feel like AIPAC needs across the board resistance, so they either bleed dry or they have to limit their focus. I hate how the fear of their money can cause candidates to say nothing. 100% agree, Average Joe. But you know whose job that is? The fucking voters. Because voters are still not voting for candidates, are getting tricked into not voting for candidates that are standing up to AIPAC because of AIPAC money. So it's up to the voters. If AIPAC is still able to lose politicians their elections, then politicians will still be affected by AIPAC. End of story. Ted says, I think blue states are better, but why do you think red states are more popular to move to? I don't believe that red states are more popular to move to. I believe that people are moving to red states out of economic necessity. Like at the moment, the Republican Party, Donald Trump, and the billionaire class have increased the affordability crisis to the point where people are forced to live in places they don't want to live. They are forced to move back in with their parents. They are forced to go where they can afford an apartment or to buy a house. And that is red states. And that means moving somewhere that has some of the worst educational and healthcare outcomes in the country. You know? Okay. T Key says the affordability he inherited. So that's inaccurate, T Keys. Would you like me to go into more detail? I'm happy to explain why the affordability crisis is the fault of Trump and the Republican Party. Austin Smith says, is this American or British politics? It is 99% American politics. If there are questions I can answer about politics outside of America, I will. Yeah, I cannot guarantee you that I will know the answer to those questions. All right. T Keys says, oh my God, let's talk. All right. So the reason why inflation hit 9% during the Biden administration was because of decisions and mistakes that Trump made during his administration. It is also associated with hypermonopolization. It's the reason why there's no real free market competition right now. That's not necessarily 100% Trump's fault, but it is the fault of the Republican Party, because that is their political philosophy, to not regulate companies and to not stop conglomerization from happening, even if it removes free market capitalism. But Trump's trade war in the first term, his mishandling of the COVID pandemic, which fucked up supply chains and increased demand because supply was so low, that is his deal with OPEC surrounding producing fewer fossil fuels, increased gas costs, which increased the cost of everything. Like, all of that was the fault of the Trump administration. Additionally, we can see this play out over the last 6 or 7 years, where during the Biden administration, inflation went from 9% to 2.4%. Ergo, the Biden administration was doing things to fix the problem they inherited from Trump. And we are seeing inflation go back up again during the Trump administration. So there you go, my guy. Aaron Gack says, have you read Marx? I read a little bit in college, but I don't remember a lot of it. Hyen says, how do you feel that the USA says that Israel has the right to defend itself? Do you think Iran should do... You got to finish that question, Hyen. I believe every nation has the right to defend itself, so it's hard for me to criticize that talking point. I will say that oftentimes people use that talking point right before they vote to send Israel more money and weapons, which I do not think that they should do. So as a justification for blindly supporting the Netanyahu government and giving them more resources to do their war crimes, I do not agree with that. But I don't have an argument against blank nation has the right to defend itself, because Iran has the right to defend itself, and Russia has the right to defend itself, and Canada has the right to defend itself, etc., etc. Toby says, is it true that all lefties pee sitting down? Congratulations. That is not a good faith question, so you're out of here. And the answer is, I do not pee sitting down. I pee standing up on your mom's face. That's part of our sex games, because I'm in a sexual relationship with your mother. Wandering Fear North says, what is your opinion on historical and dialectical materialism? That question's over my head. Wandering Fear North. Randy Barber says, if Article 2, Section 4 is implemented, can this country recover? Let's see here. Article 2, Section 4. Article 2, Section 4. Can be removed from office through impeachment. I mean, you're asking me if we impeach Trump and JD Vance or people of the administration, will we recover? Absolutely. I think the question is, will we recover if it is not implemented? Are we speaking the same language here, Randy Barber? Let me know. Okay. Average Joe, just clear my intent behind focusing on this topic is not to debate you, but to bring attention to the issue. I hope that's cool. Oh, yeah. Average Joe. Again, we're in agreement on 99% of this. We talk about politics the way that my wife and I talk about politics, where we just argue about the 1% that we disagree on. The Fixer Mike says, I have sciatica. I have to pee sitting down. I hate the big deal, question mark. I mean, the Fixer Mike, like, you're married and you have a girlfriend. I do not think that you need to assert your masculinity over anybody. Raphael says, what economic system do you believe in? I believe in a mixed model like they have in Norway and Sweden and Scandinavia. Hyan says, do you support that happen in Iraq? And do you think the USA should do that to Iran? No, I do not, Hyan. I do not believe in stupid regime change wars. All right. Ray Bloomer says, I enjoy sitting to pee. I mean, yeah, it makes it easier to play with your phone. You have to worry about pissing everywhere. Raphael says, what? All right, did that one. Randy Barber says, I am afraid the only recovery is removal of the entire administration. I generally agree with that, Randy. I think that if you have the political power to impeach and remove from office Donald Trump, then you also have the political power to impeach and remove everybody in his cabinet. Like, they are all equally culpable in the crimes of the Trump administration. So it's not that there isn't evidence to impeach J.D. Vance and Pam Bondi and Pete Hegseth and Tom Homan. Like, that shit exists. It's that the Republican Party isn't going to impeach those people the same way that they aren't going to impeach Donald Trump. If we had politicians who were willing to, obey the law and impeach presidents when they do high crimes and misdemeanors, then they would also do J.D. Vance and Pam Bondi at all. Excuse me. Alrighty. Average Joe says, do you want to hear about an interesting trend that I have come across? Yeah. I mean, if you can fit it in 300 characters, Average Joe. Okay. John 420 says, yeah, Joe Biden and Kamala should have been impeached. John, the Republican Party did a bunch of impeachment inquiries into Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and they didn't find anything, John. So either Joe Biden and Kamala Harris didn't do anything to merit impeachment, or the Republican Party is so incompetent that they were not able to find it, John. Let me know what you think about that. MS says, could a Marxist-Leninist revolution happen? Probably not, but also it depends on how you define a revolution. Like, I define a revolution as doing the work politically to pass laws that give more power to the working class, that make it so that board of directors are mostly the workers who do the work, that CEOs are not allowed to make more than 50 times what their lowest paid employee is making, tax incentives for companies to be employee owned, things of that nature. I believe that is, in essence, a Marxist-Leninist revolution. Some people think that revolutions have to include things like Molotov cocktails. I don't believe that that's the case. Bene says, hi, what do you think about socialism if it's done in the style of Thomas Sankara did in Burkina Faso. I don't know what that style of socialism is, Bene. So sorry about that. But yeah, I'm curious to hear what you would say. That how do you define what that style of socialism is versus other styles of socialism? Raphael says, what do you think of the new immigration legislation accepted in the European Council? I don't know anything about it, Raphael. I hope that it is progressive because, because of climate change and stupid warmongers, there is going to be ongoing immigration and humanitarian crises. And so it is incumbent upon all of us. It will behoove all of us to be a lot fucking chiller about immigration, because there but for the grace of God go I. We do not know what regions are going to be uninhabitable going forward. So maybe you could be chill about somebody coming into where you live, because maybe somebody else is going to have the opportunity to be or not be chill about you moving to where they are. Think about that. Alrighty. Born to Bark says, a Lenin or a Lenin revolution? All I'm thinking about right now is all of the abusive behavior that is coming out about the way that John Lennon acted when he was, doing shit. So, let's see here. Zane Mooneyhan says, how do you feel about Minsky's instability theorem? I don't know anything about it. Clean Fresh Edit says, why aren't more politicians talking about the catastrophic entry-level job market? That is a really good question, Clean Fresh Edits. I guess I do hear Democratic politicians talking about this in the conversations around things like affordability and things like and things like artificial intelligence. I don't know if it's at the top of the list just because there are so many psychotic things that are happening right now. So many illegal and barbaric and corrupt actions that are happening within the Trump administration at the direction of Trump himself. Where do you fit that in? Like everybody's healthcare costs have gone up 300%. People are getting laid off left and right because Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want to pay for everybody's now much more expensive healthcare. Like, goddamn, like we're going to talk about that and Iran and Venezuela and Cuba and Trump's crypto coin and the Epstein cover up and all of the abuse that is happening to people in ICE and CPB detention facilities, like spending $1 billion on this war, 13 service members already dead, school children dead in Iran. Like, God, there's just too many things to talk about. Trump is profiting off of selling political pardons to people who deserve to be in jail. He is pardoning them because it is making him richer. Like how much time should we devote to that versus the entry-level job market? You know what I mean? But I'm with you, Randy Barber says, will midterms occur? Yes, Randy, but we need to be vigilant because Trump and the Republican Party are going to try to do shit to steal or cancel that election. And so we have to be vigilant about it. We have to make sure that we're on the phone with our local representatives, make sure they have contingency plans for all the various shit that Trump and Republicans could try to do. But Trump and the Republican Party do not get to decide whether we have midterms or not. First of all, elections are run by states. Second of all, that is one of the rights that we have as citizens. We decide when there are elections. They don't. Anonymous Morat says, how has Iran been 2 weeks away from having a nuke for 20 years? I believe they're caught in some sort of a time loop, like 12 Monkeys shit or Groundhog Day. Yeezus Glazer says, how can we stop Trump from destroying our country? The answer to that is to do the work, Yeezus. The way that we do the work is simple. We strike, we protest, we boycott. We organize, we convince, we recruit. We put political pressure on elected representatives, business leaders, billionaires, corporations, and we join groups that are already doing this work, like Indivisible, Run for Something, Vote Save America, and Swing Left. And while I've got all of you here, I outline all of this on my Discord channel. So if you join the Discord, you have access to that whole list. You don't have to write it down or anything. And if you like what I'm doing here, if you support it and you want to support it financially, you can. You don't have to, obviously, because we're in a cost of living crisis. But if you have the dollars and you want to use them to show support for what I'm doing here, the mechanisms are available to you. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can send bits on Twitch. You can be a super fan on TikTok. You can be a subscriber on Twitch. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free. Costs you $0, helps me out a ton. And you can also join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. And special love to all of my regular financial contributors: Muzz King, Pliff, Average Joe, It's the Rocketeer, Lauren, the two Seans, D, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, and Patrick. Salvo says, what do you think about Nazism, fascism? I'm against them. Aaron Gack says, what do you think of the U.S. rejecting to recognize slavery as a crime against humanity? More evidence of the Trump administration being psychotic. Droid Man says, hello, dude. Hope all is well. Hope all is well with you. S.E. Morgan says, any company that switches to AI we stop spending money with? Yeah, I generally agree with that. Andy Fowler says, what threat does or did Iran pose to the U.S.? I do not believe that there was a threat. And I believe that people within Trump's intelligence community are saying that, or at least they have said that until Trump told them to stop saying that. Op says, what are your thoughts on how Wendy Bird is handling the political spectrum in the Ozarks? Don't know anything about that, unfortunately. Jamie Sweeney says, do you support United Ireland? Don't know anything about that. I would say if the Irish want that, then I say go for it. Andy Fowler says, just what I thought. I believe we're in agreement, Andy? I don't know. That LOL makes me think you're being sarcastic. Okay. Andy Fowler says, learn some history. Got it. Seems like you're maybe casting aspersions here, Andy. I don't really truck with people who are trying to start fights, Andy. So if you want to just like have a good faith discussion on the merits, like I'm happy to engage. But if you're just going to call me a jerk and a liar and an idiot, then you can leave whenever you like. Gideon says, have you been on a birthright trip to Israel? I did not. I was too old by the time I learned about it. And I was interested because it was a free trip and I was poor, not because I give a shit about Israel at all. Carmine says, what are you reading right now? I just finished reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which I found fascinating and I am desperate to talk to somebody about. If they have also read it, let me know on the Discord. And I'm also reading a Bill Bryson book about the human body. I think Bill Bryson is an underrated nonfiction author. Very enjoyable. Okay, let's see here. Andy Fowler says, not fighting, just informing. Oh, really? Because your LOL and learn some history doesn't seem like you are here. Oh, I'm just trying to let you know that you're a little uninformed about things, you know. I only called you a stupid cuck because you're uninformed about things. Miss me with that nonsense, man. All right. Droid Man says, sorry, what was the first book? Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. It's an old one. All right. User a bunch of numbers says, Trump or Kamala? Kamala. Somebody forgot to unplug a Russian bot. Diego Vargas, great to see you again. Even if Democrats win in 28, Trump has already dragged the country into a long-term war. That sucks. I believe that a united Democratic Party with enough political power in Congress to actually pass shit can undo the damage that Trump has done. How long it will take and how much we'll have to give up in order to fix it is an open question, but we can fix it. Let's see here. Luke Rich says, did Margaret Thatcher own a goldfish? I'm going to say no, Luke, because I feel like you asked me these questions that you know the answer to, and I got a 50% chance to get that right. All right, Average Joe says, I'm currently working as a research assistant for my degree, and it's a longitudinal panel survey starting with middle school-aged kids. You know, Average Joe, I feel like you could have chopped that down to a more 300-character friendly, so you didn't have to put it in 2 comments thing. The intent is to test their politicization as they get older. These respondents are overwhelmingly more discerning regarding heavily politicized issues. It will be interesting to see future studies to determine when we start to see a firm political ideology take shape. You know, Average Joe, I believe that brevity is the soul of wit. So, you know, You could have said that in 300 characters. I guarantee you could have said that in 300 characters. All right. Diego Vargas says, who won in Marjorie Taylor Greene's old district? I did not see, unfortunately. Vickham says, is tax theft? No, it is not. S.E. Morgan says, the parallel between the rise to power of the Nazis and Trump are staggering. Trump used their words. That is 100% accurate, S.E. Morgan. The connections are staggering to the point where it seems intentional. Alrighty. Randy Barber says, what can be done to get the Supreme Court to do their job? Randy Barber, it's the same answer to everything. We got to vote. We got to do the work. When we elect people who will do things like impeach Supreme Court justices for being corrupt or for disobeying the law, for being hypocritical, when we elect politicians that will sit more Supreme Court justices to dilute the vote of psychopaths like Thomas and Alito and Gorsuch and Barrett and Kavanaugh. Sometimes I like to challenge myself and see if I can name if I can name all of the Supreme Court justices. Droidman says, what will you think if Iran war ends in a month? I will be shocked. I will be shocked if it does. Average Joe says, nope, you're getting more chapters. Well, fuck around and find out, Average Joe. Fuck around and find out how many more cool things Stream Elements can do. Diego Vargas says, now they lifted the age cap to 42 in the Army. What the fuck will die during boot camp? Yeah, I'm 47, and my wife was like, do you see they raised the age? Are you worried? And I was like, look at all the pills I gotta take. They're not sending me to war. Jesus Glazer says, who will lead the Dems in the next election? That is for the primary voters to decide. Born to Bark says, we're in World War Z, but not the Z's we thought. Unfortunately, 100% accurate. Average Joe says, LOL, that sounds like fisticuffs or sounds like a throuple. Okay, let's see here. iPop says, what are your thoughts on school promoting political ideology, be it either left or right ideologies? That's a really good question, iPop, because this is an issue that the right wing has been weaponizing for a long time. They have been using specious arguments to claim that schools are indoctrinating children to left-wing ideologies, when the reality is that learning about things like history and getting a higher education makes it so that people become more left-wing, not because we are indoctrinating or brainwashing people. Not only has the right created this narrative in order to smear the idea of getting an education, but they have also used it to start their own more legitimate indoctrination brainwashing campaign in the form of things like Talking Points USA and PragerU. That is something that obviously needs to be fought tooth and nail. But people got to recognize, like, there is such a thing as right and wrong. There is such a thing as accurate and inaccurate. And teaching children the difference between those two things is not indoctrination into political philosophy. It is just giving people an education. Okay, Dottie Galvin says, have you heard about HB 754 in Tennessee? I have not, Dottie. Would you like to let me know what it is? Fishboy says, are you left or right wing? I am left wing. Randy Barber says, where are today's Minutemen utilizing the Second Amendment to fix the problem? I'm 74, not me. I mean, arguably, Randy Barber, you have a lot less to lose. So, you know, if I you know, I had to stop that bit because I wasn't sure how if you were going to take that in the tone that I meant it, in the loving tone of how we, as we all get older, we are all much closer to the grave. Yeah, I think that that's an open question. You know, you have people like Alex Preddy, who took a gun to a protest and was murdered by ICE and / or CPB. And the right wingers are using the fact that he brought a gun to a protest as evidence that he deserved to be murdered by ICE and CPB. So is using the Second Amendment a good way of protecting protesters from government overreach? Is it a good way of keeping ICE and CPB from escalating things? Or is it an excuse that ICE and CPB will use to summarily execute every single one of us? Like, I tend to come down on the side of peaceful protests. Don't give them any excuse to demagogue what you are doing. Ready, let's see here. Rez Olfiki says, what is America first priority, USA or Israel? So that's a really good question, Reza, because the kind of like the narrative around America first is that its first priority should be America. In reality, America first is Trump first. I think it is illuminating that America first was also the slogan of the American Nazi Party in the 1930s and 1940s. So I don't think people should be using that phrase. If what you want is for America to stop spending money on irresponsible, expensive, and barbaric regime change wars, then just say that. Alrighty. Let's see here. Xavier Garcia says, what is your most right-leaning policy take as someone who leans left? Ooh. I don't think I have one, Xavier. Like, I used to believe that in things like, if you're on welfare, you shouldn't be able to spend money on things like drugs, alcohol, recreational stuff like movies, cigarettes, tattoos, shit like that. Because I was like, if you need money to survive, then, and that's money that's coming from people with jobs, then you should not be using that money for things that are not intimately involved with you being able to put a roof over your head or put food in your mouth. But a couple of things changed my mind. Not the least of which being that enforcing that rule costs more money than just letting people use that money for whatever they want. Additionally, it's kind of barbaric to say that just because you need government assistance to survive, you're not allowed to enjoy your life at all. So yeah, I honestly cannot tell you. I can tell you things that I disagree with some of the far left on. You know, like there are certain people out there who believe that we shouldn't be voting for or supporting the Democratic Party because they're not far left enough. I don't believe in that, but I honestly, I could not tell you a single conservative or Republican, even leaning take that I have. Yemi says, thoughts on the USA attacking Iran? It is reckless, irresponsible, expensive, a waste of human lives. There are not enough negative words for me to describe how I feel about America striking Iran. It is so, yeah, they did so little planning and foresight into this. We're going to hope that it is only a catastrophe the level of Iraq and Afghanistan. All right. Toyer Lekran says, why did the Dems fund the genocide in Gaza? If they didn't, Trump wouldn't have won. So a couple of things about that, Toyer. I want to make it clear that my foundational belief is that we should not be sending money and weapons to Israel because the government of Israel is engaged in a genocide. Like, I want to make sure that we agree on that. But I do think there's a big difference between Republicans voting en masse to send more money and weapons to Israel now during the Trump administration and Democrats voting on sending money and weapons to Israel during the Biden administration when October 7th had just happened. Now, I do not have complicated beliefs surrounding Israel. Israel has been a bad faith actor in that region for a long time. They have been doing war crimes against the people of Palestine. The nicest thing you can say about the way the Israeli government has treated Palestine is that they're doing apartheid. That's like the nicest thing that you can say about it. But there is a lot of misinformation out there about the relationship between Israel and Palestine. And some people vote based on that relationship. And there are a lot of people who feel very strongly that after October 7th was not the time for America to start putting their foot down on the relationship between America and Netanyahu. Again, I don't agree with that, but I think it makes a lot more sense than the way I think it's a lot more murky of an issue than people are giving it credit for. Again, I think that's probably the worst thing that Biden did during his administration. Right. Toyrell says Netanyahu helped fund and create Hamas. That is 100% accurate. You will not hear me arguing against that at all. Jack Crocky says, what do you think about Noel Carey and Jamie Mulvey in the East? Unfortunately, I don't know who those people are, Jack. I don't even know if you're talking about the East of America with those people. Lucas says, he's funded by AIPAC, by the way. Who's funded by AIPAC? I know you're not talking about me, Lucas. Average Joe. Come on, man. All right. Let's see here. Dottie Govin says, a bill that would require gender clinics to report detailed patients' stats, locations, treatments, etc. Yeah, Dottie, it's a fucking nightmare. You know, it is the Republican Party putting the LGBTQ community in their crosshairs so they can inflict as much harm on them as possible, demagogue them, distract from other issues by saying, this is what we should be concerned about. This. Men and women's sports and people switching their genders is way more important than you being able to put food on the table or be able to pay for healthcare or electricity or rent. Nathan Aura says, do you think Ro Khanna or AOC could win in 28? Yeah, sure. Epop says, what about Talking Points USA makes you think it is problematic? I mean, it is based on a false ideology. It is a political system built on lies in order to convince people to vote for the exact politicians that make everything worse. It is not following the data to come up with a political philosophy. It is a political philosophy based in supporting right-wing politicians, and then they look for the data and cherry pick to support that in itself. It is fundamentally flawed and dishonest. It is indoctrination. It is lying to children to convince them to be a part of this culture that tells them not to believe their lying eyes and ears. Netnol says, thoughts on ideological pragmatic. I don't know what that is. Gitchy says, why is AOC so quiet on what's going on in the Middle East? I do not believe that she is, Wesser Tip. I don't know if there's a level of talking about it that you want her to be doing that she is not, but I'm pretty sure she has been vocal about it. Alrighty, Wasser types his opinion on the Germans. I support the Germans the same way that I support the French and the British and the Iranians and the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Americans and the Canadians and the Mexicans. Randy Barber says, unfortunately, the MAGAs won't debate anyone with knowledge. Randy Barber, I generally agree with that sentiment, but I want to make sure that we are not disparaging voters. If we're talking about like talking heads, like Ben Shapiro and his ilk, Alex Jones, Elon Musk, etc., then yeah, I agree with you. But I don't believe in casting aspersions on other voters. Ian says, problem with anti-Israel crowd, you don't factor in the fact that they are surrounded by Islamists. Being surrounded by Islamists is not necessarily a bad thing, Ian. There's nothing inherently bad about somebody being an Islamist. If you think there's a problem with somebody because they're an extremist that believes in solving their problem with violence, like, yeah, I get you there. But that is not the case. Like, not all of Israel is surrounded by Islamic extremists who want to blow Israel off the map. I would also say, Ian, like, what has Israel done to stop that from happening except violence and oppression? What has Israel done to make friends with their neighbors, because I haven't seen any of that shit. Jonos Jelly says we need a far right party. It's not genocide if it works. Jonos, I feel like you're being flip. I feel like you're being whimsical. I am going to give you an opportunity to not make jokes like that going forward on my live stream. That's not what we do here. Ruzlix says, why does America support Israel no matter what war crimes they commit? Excellent question, Ruzlix, and it's very complicated, hard question to answer. The issue is that there are a bunch of different motivations for politicians to support Israel no matter what war crimes they commit. And let's be clear that this is the Israeli government. We're not talking about the Israeli people. There are a lot of innocent civilians in Israel who also do not like what their government is doing, the same way that there are a lot of innocent civilians in America who do not like what their government is doing. So yeah, just a couple of motivations just to throw out there. Greed and corruption, racism against brown people, a psychotic Christian extremist belief that we need to empower Israel to dominate the Middle East to bring about the rapture. There's also worry of being labeled an anti-Semite. There's worry about getting in the crosshairs of AIPAC and having them use their extremely well-funded lobbying organization to lose you your election or lose you your primary. Some people legitimately believe that there is too much hatred towards Israel for us to abandon them. Like, I don't agree with any of these motivations. I think it is long since time that we should have stopped sending them money and weapons. But yeah, there's a bunch of different motivations. Some of them are in worse faith than other. All right, iPop says, you said Talking Points USA is bad as it spreads misinformation and cherry-pick data. Who then speaks the truth? Excellent question, iPop. So there's a difference between an organization that is trying to tell the truth but is suffering from normal human biases, and an organization that is purposefully misleading people for their own political power and financial gain. Talking Points USA is the latter. Fox News is the latter. Breitbart is the latter. You can generally see this trend in right-wing organizations like Talking Points, like Breitbart, like Daily Wire, like One American News, etc., etc. And this is not just me saying that. Like, there have been studies. Right-wing organizations like this are the least accurate in reporting on what is going on in the world and reporting on things like history, where Talking Points and PragerU are concerned. So where do you get actual information? You need to look for organizations that are interested in the integrity of the material they're teaching. So the mainstream news, obviously there's some issues there, but if you combine that with foreign news, independent journalists, progressive news, if you look at a news aggregator like Ground News or the Reddit news feed, like, that's how you get a nice, diverse collection of political or news headlines and reporting that, because it is diverse and because it excludes right-wing media sources, you are avoiding any kind of unintentional bias and getting the most accurate version of what's happening. Let me know if you need more information on that. Netnull says, would you call yourself a monarchist? No, I would not call myself a monarchist. Randy Barber says, there is no longer a Fox News, only Fox Entertainment. I'm pretty sure that's accurate. Eliminate all Foids. Thank you for changing your name back. What country do you think will be the #1 power by 2040? I believe China. I also believe China. China is doing all the things right now to make sure that they are the #1 global superpower. And America and the Trump administration is doing everything they can to make sure that it is no longer America. All right, everybody, I'm going to start wrapping things up. Thank you so much for being here. Special thank you to everybody who supports the channel financially, and a special thank you to everybody who supports the channel in the free way by liking and sharing and telling your friends how great my live stream is and that everybody should watch it. If there are questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, then please reach out to me. Do not be shy. I want to be a resource for y'all to be more informed and engaged in politics. And so however I can do that, let me do that for you. Use me and abuse me. Use me until you use me up. DMs are open on basically all my social platforms. You can email me through my website. You can also join my Discord, which is also a great resource because not only is there a great community there, but there's recommendations for books and podcasts and civic actions that you can take and nonprofit organizations that you should join. These organizations are doing the great work of trying to fix shit, and they need good people like you. And if you're worried, like, oh, I'm in a red area and I'm worried about my safety, or I'm not able-bodied enough to leave the house, there is work for you to do. If you're too poor to donate, there is free work that you can do that doesn't cost you anything. If you're too busy to volunteer, then you can donate. These people need your help, and it is only through us doing the work that we're going to be able to get out of this. This is the fight. You ever play that game, like, what would I do if I was alive in Germany in the 1930s and 40s? Like, this is that right now. So do that work. Do that work that you think you would have done then. Do that now. Obviously, I believe in peaceful protest. So, I'm not advocating for any kind of violence or property destruction. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. We're doing a special live stream tomorrow during the No Kings protest, starting around 11:30 Pacific time again. And lastly, just do the work, guys, and be good to each other. You don't have to be a jerk to do the work. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. Have yourselves a great weekend, everybody. Thank you again. I will see you tomorrow, or I will see you on Monday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.